We've just seen the most amount of sales happened in the month of July going back to 2021. So sales volume was up year over year. It was up versus 2024, 2023, 2022. And we're going to break down why that is happening. My name is Tom Storey. I appreciate you being back here on the channel. And it is market update time. In today's video, we're going to run through all the numbers I think are important for the city of Toronto for July of 2025. And I've really picked out the things that I think are actually worth talking about. If you enjoy these videos, make sure to like this video, get subscribed to the channel. If you want to book a call with our team, you can do that in the first link in the description. This is the first, I guess, market update I've done. I'd want to say at least 18 months, at least, where I'm looking through the data and I'm like, oh, that's actually like kind of encouraging. You know, it's not all just like getting worse all the time. And I can kind of sum up that, you know, I can tell you like prices still aren't going up this year. You're still going to see downward pressure on smaller condos. Like all those things will remain. But there's some interesting data points this month that honestly I wasn't really expecting until I saw it in the data. So we're going to break everything down. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go through it like we always do. So get engaged in the comments. Let me know what you think of everything that we're going to talk about today. All right, let's jump right into it. Okay. So what we're looking at here is July of 2025. There was 6,100 sales. That is up almost 11% from at the same month last year. This change not being a negative number in sales volume year over year, I can't actually remember the last time I saw that. Does this mean this is the bottom of the market? That's not what I'm saying. But it is kind of interesting. That was usually a negative number. Your new listings is still above what it was last year. Your active listings is still way higher than it was last year, as we've seen for most of 2025. Your average price is ticking downwards. And then your days on market are above what they were last year, like we've seen across the board. But why did the sales numbers actually go up year over year? So let's dig into this a little bit further. So your detached properties shade under 1.6, your semis basically 1.25, your townhouses 920, and your condos 684. That number was over $700,000 last month. So if you actually take a look at all of these average prices based on the sales that have happened in July 2025, they are lower than they were in previous months this year. So perhaps sellers are finally going like, okay, fine. If this is what I can get and I want to sell, I will do it. And the people that are not selling are just taking it off the market, but they're not coming back to the market. And I think that's what we're going to see in terms of why the overall numbers are looking a little bit more positive, but I'll get to that in a second. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that the July number of transactions that we saw for the entire Toronto Real Estate Board, but also the City of Toronto, are the highest they've been in 4 years, specifically going back to 2021. So let's take a look at what those numbers are showing us. Okay, so in 2021, just to remind everybody, we had the biggest year we've ever seen, ever in the history of the Toronto Real Estate Board. I don't think that will happen again for like, I don't know, I'll put myself on the line here, 15 years minimum. Like, I just don't think that's going to happen again. All those things coming in at once. There was still travel bans. People couldn't spend their money on anything. The government had the money printer on. Like, all these things were happening. Tons of sales. People were obsessed with real estate. Obviously, then the sales get cut in half in 2022. Remember, July of 2022 is when the rates really started going up. July of 2023, a little bit better than 2022, 2024. And then it's like, okay, that's like a significant jump up in 2025. 6,100 transactions, which is higher than the previous 3 years. We're never going to touch 2021 again, at least in my opinion, for a long, long time. So that's what the numbers are telling us in terms of July sales. Now, these numbers I'm showing you are Toronto Real Estate Board data, which covers the 7 different areas. But as I've always maintained, this channel, the reason I made this channel is to talk about Toronto real estate, truly Toronto real estate. So let's take a look at the City of Toronto. 2,200 sales that happened in July of 2025, which was higher than 24, which was higher than 23, which was higher than 2022. Again, never going to touch 2021. Okay, so is that a positive sign? Well, I guess, right? Because what we were seeing for a long time is that when sales volume really decreased rapidly, we all kind of knew that eventually it would impact prices. Like sales volume slows down first, and then prices get impacted, because if sales volume goes down but new listings still come onto the market at that same rate, then what that means is the absorption's just not there. Inventory builds up. When inventory builds up, then eventually you get yourself into buyer's market territory, and that's when you see prices drop down if it remains there for an extended period of time. If sales volume starts to pick up and inventory goes down, this could be like 1 month of a trend that eventually our sales volume is more in terms of like the 10-year average that we're used to. Because even though we are higher than the last 3 years, like those are historically low years comparative to our biggest year that we've ever seen. Now, if we take a look at actual sales just for 2025, we're not comparing it year over year anymore for the city of Toronto. This year has trended that every single month we've increased sales volume until July. It's like, okay, so every single month so far this year, we had more sales than the previous month. That is not news in any good market or bad market. That almost happens every single year. And July dropping off to June, like should happen. It would be very, very rare that July would have more sales than in June. But if you go back to April, like we had more sales in July than we had in April. Why is that? Because active listings have actually probably gone up since then. I think they have at least a few thousand across the board. So why would more transactions take place in July? One of the things we've talked about a lot is in a market that is evolving, in price discovery markets, there is usually a zone there. Sellers still want this, buyers only want to pay this. And I think we've just been in this current market condition for long enough now that there's enough comparable sales, and we call this the transition zone, that buyers and sellers are getting closer on what they both believe the property is worth. So maybe that's what we're starting to see in terms of like, it's very rare that we would see more sales in a July versus an April. That's just like not normal, because we haven't really had rate cuts in a long time too. And you could actually argue that the fact Bank of Canada has held for a while might have actually helped sales volume pick up, which you'd be like, well, Tom, wait, if they cut, that should increase sales volume. And yeah, like, but if they continue to cut, then buyers are like, well, maybe I'll just wait till the next cut. So there's 3 things that stuck out to me from this data. The one that we've just covered was just the transactions being better than the last few years, and more sales happening in July than we saw in April, because that's just not something that is normal to me. The next is what is going on with active listings, the percentage of what is on the market. So we'll jump back in. This was at the end of July for the city of Toronto. What is for sale? Of all the listings for sale, well, what is actually on the market? And unsurprisingly, it's going to look pretty similar to what we've seen so far this year. Your detached listings is 2,700, which makes up 26% of the market. Semi-detached homes in terms of active listing is still only 5% of the overall inventory. Your condos making up the bulk of everything for sale in the city of Toronto. Your condo townhouses making up another 7%. So 67% of all the active listings for sale in the city of Toronto are still condominium properties, or at least with a condo fee, because they could include condo townhouses as well. An attached row townhouse means freehold attached row townhouse, make up a very small percentage of the market. So condos are still almost 70% of what is for sale in the city of Toronto, with detached housing coming in second place at 26%. The months of inventory for all property types actually started coming down. And I want to give you a reason why I believe this has happened. So let's take a look at this quickly. So for the city of Toronto, you can tell we got lots of different markets happening at once. Your detached homes are at 4.1 months of inventory, so still very balanced out. Semis are still hot. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go up in value, but they're getting the most amount of attention. They're at a price point that more people like and what they actually want. Your condo inventory for city of Toronto was 6.2. Not that long ago, that number was 8. So it's actually starting to come down. Your condo townhouses are 5, and your attached row townhouses is 3.4 months of inventory. Now, let me tell you what is actually happening here. Yes, there was more sales in July than we've previously seen. And we saw more sales in July than we saw earlier in what was supposed to be the spring market. But that's not the number one reason why the inventory levels are actually coming down here. The reason why, and this happens every single summer, is because sellers that can't sell when they get to August just say, well, let's just take it off the market. and will relist in the fall. So what I think has started to happen is there's been lots of cancel and relist all year long. What is happening in July, I should say actually for this data, is that sellers were like, all right, we can't get our number. Let's just take it off the market, but they're not relisting it the next day like they would have earlier in the year. They're like, let me enjoy August. Let's talk about this in the fall market. Now, I don't think things get better in the fall market price-wise. You know, maybe you could argue activity could get better based on the July numbers, just on like transactions taking place and interest level and all of that. But I think that's really what's happening here because the sales haven't gone up enough where the absorption is just happening at a much higher rate. I think it's terminated properties haven't been relisted, which would fall into two categories, either going to try to relist in the fall at some point if I can get my number, but I don't think they will if they haven't sold yet, unless they're willing to come down on their price expectations. Or I'm taking it off the market. I've decided I can't get my number. I know the market's not getting better anytime soon, so I'm not going to relist. And even though they didn't get their number or sell, it's bringing the overall inventory down, and the sales have gone up in that same period of time, at least versus previous years. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not saying the market's changing, but this is the first like glimmer of hope I've seen in terms of what the numbers are saying in a while. But as I'll say again, prices are still not going up this year. Okay, so what? So what, Tom? Market update. What does this all mean? Well, what it means is that there is less inventory based on the absorption. Not overall listings, but the absorption rate for the city of Toronto based on property type. We've seen more sales than previous Julys and more sales in July than earlier this year, which I believe the reason for the inventory is because of the terminations. And the last thing I'm going to talk about in this video is something I had posted on Instagram that I thought would be interesting to share here. And I had done a video on this last week, but what it's saying, and this is just really advice for sellers, I took every single sale that had happened so far in 2025, every single sale. And I looked at them and I just looked, okay, for the properties that actually successfully sold, how long were they on the market during that current contract? Now, there are many properties that canceled, relisted several times. The problem is I couldn't go through 13,000 sales and figure out every single one. It was literally impossible. I don't have access to that data. But what it's saying is that in a current contract, meaning 0 days on market, fresh listing, whether that's the first time you've listed or the third time you've listed, 70% of homes that are selling, or roughly 70%, 68%, are happening in the first 30 days. So if you list a property and you don't make any adjustments to it throughout the period of time, your chances of selling, not just for your asking price, but selling in general, once you pass 60 days are just significantly lower than in that first 60-day period. You're basically a sitting duck after 60 days if you don't make any adjustments. And I took a look back at all of our seller transactions so far in 2025. And in most of them, not all, but most, we had to at least make one adjustment on our strategy when we hit a certain days on market to make sure that we positioned ourselves as the best available option. So there you go. A little bit longer than normal for this market update. I hope that you found that valuable. I'm trying to show you some information that maybe isn't available elsewhere on the internet. I don't really watch other real estate videos, but hopefully this is something that you haven't seen anywhere else, at least in this way of me explaining it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. My name is Tom Storey. And remember, home is where your story begins.